All right, welcome to another episode of Verified. I'm Chad, better known as Riz, and today I have with me Michael and Adam, who are VeriDAO members, and they've been working on FOIA requests. Michael actually secured a FOIA of the Kraken hard drive. This is the communications between Kraken and the SEC that we've been looking for well over a year now. So welcome, Michael. Welcome, Adam.
Good to be back.
Yeah,
So do you guys want to kick off with a little recap to kind of catch everybody up to where we're at today?
yeah. A lot of action on the FOIA side, specifically to what you said first. The Kraken FOIA that does go back to 2024. Just tracking the Kraken FOIA, September 11th, believe it or not, was the date that one was submitted. Again, 2024. And then catching up more recently, we were able to, over 9, 10 months, go back and forth with the SEC and then get that smoking flash drive document from the SEC. Took a lot of work, a lot of back and forth on that, all the way to July of this year of 2025.
And you guys actually created an amicus brief, so I understand it's a supplemental amicus brief, and you guys actually added that to evidence. So now that's on the court record.
Yes, the smoking flash drive was introduced. So the VeriDAO had three filings in SEC versus Middleton. We're a friend of the court. We are not the defrauded. We're the claim defrauded, which, I mean, it just not very rare that this kind of stuff happens. So yeah, we did. Whenever Reggie filed his original motion to vacate, we felt like we had something to say. We were not the defrauded, right? We filed an amicus going back in the Ripple case. We filed an amicus here. But as the motion to dismiss progressed, the SEC actually got back to me in the middle of this. So what happened was, I handed those documents to our attorney at Kinney Hertz Perry, and he thought that there was a really good chance, even though it's rare that amicus will file a supplemental brief. This was evidence direct to the case, right? This is the smoking flash drive. These are the Kraken documents. It goes back to Reggie's fraud on the court, right? Dissipation of assets. Anyway, so they introduced that document. That's the filing number 2. And then the third filing, whenever as the case progressed, switching from fraud on the court to how the Veri Fair Fund was administered and the final accounting of that. That's what we're talking about now. And believe it or not, we did file FOIAs for that back in 2024 as well. And so we were able to introduce those responses from the SEC. Now, those responses weren't documents. We have not seen any type of final accounting. And come to find out here recently in your recent 157, the most recent document, the SEC hasn't put final accounting together. They have to reconstruct it, right? And they asked the judge until January 23rd of next year for time to reconstruct something that they were supposed to be updating the court on every quarter. I mean,
Right.
that's the way this was supposed to go, and that's what we're finding out now is that that's not what happened. And again, so I'll leave it there, and then we can dig into it a little more.
Okay, so before we get into more of the 157 document and the VFF, Adam, I understand that you also have some FOIAs about the Vader platform. Do you want to just briefly catch us up on that?
I do. And just to comment on what Michael was just saying, not a good position to be in, I think, for anybody. So more to come on that, right? As far as the Vader platform, so just to give a little bit of background information, anyone who is or isn't familiar with the Vader platform, that was Reggie's original platform that was used for his technology. And this was eventually shut down based on the SEC bringing the complaint. Well, prior to that complaint coming, Reggie gave a demonstration of that Vader platform to show that it is working and operational and that it worked well. And so he gave a live demonstration to folks at the SEC. And I do believe that there was also a phone conference that was opened up during that demonstration as well. So the FOIA request that I had submitted was, well, can you give some records, some names of the individuals who attended that day? And so Seems like a fairly simple request, but what we found throughout this whole process is that nothing is simple. Well, it's not easy, at least. Maybe it's simple, but it's not easy. So that they do a good job of keeping the information close to their chest. This FOIA was originally opened up on March 2nd, 2025, and it was denied. So my request was denied. I appealed it. That appeal was accepted. And then I just received my second denial. And also, the second appeal was denied September 25th. So just days before the October 1st government shutdown for 2025. So
So they
just
denied it, suggesting that it never actually happened. Is that what you mean by denied?
so basically, they're saying that they don't have any records that are responsive to my
I see.
request.
Okay.
And which we know is false because the Vader demonstration was named in court documents, and I actually cited those court documents as part of my request. So, 6 months of back and forth there, and then eventually they denied it. So, this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with. But whether or not we go back again on that is to be determined.
So from what I understand of everything, basically the SEC approached Reggie, or Reggie approached the SEC. I'm unclear on how that happened, but I believe there was a discussion back in 2017 that kind of kicked off this investigation for 2 years. And Reggie cooperated with the SEC for well over 2 years and at a cost of over millions of dollars to cooperate. And he gave multiple documents. I believe it was in the millions of documents to the SEC, just to be as transparent as he could be. And part of that was the demonstration. So he did demonstrate the working Vader platform, which is essentially taking his research and creating portfolios based on the research that one of the customers would pay for. Um, so yeah, and from what I understand, is he actually got some pretty interesting comments, such as that they've never seen a platform work at this level before, and then they actually told him to shut it down, and then claimed later that he never had a working platform. Am I right in actually saying that?
That is the case. That
Yeah,
is actually it. I mean, he was being transparent. I think he was very transparent throughout the whole process. He gave them that demonstration, and then only to later on, have them tell him shut it down, and then telling the judge that there was no operational platform later.
right. And even though he didn't agree, he actually did shut the platform down,
Hmm,
just to put that out
correct.
there.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so I feel like we're a little bit caught up, but maybe mentioning the fact that in the TRO transcript, just to rehash or remind everybody, Jason Siebert, Reggie's lawyer, pointed out that in the TRO transcript that Jorge Tenrero actually admitted, this is the SEC lawyer, actually admitted that the Kraken account was in fact a business account because Judge Hall at the time suggested that she wasn't going to freeze any personal accounts and only freeze business accounts. Uh, so for the Kraken account to be included in that freeze, Jorge Tenrero basically had to claim it as a business account. Um, so that
Yeah.
was one of the revelations there. Any
He
comments on that?
actually said, "Judge, it's an account we can freeze." He had to get something out of that
Right.
being. He was
And
grasping
then,
at then.
and then you guys followed it up with the FOIA request, proving that the SEC was in communication with Kraken almost a year before that TRO even happened. Temporary restraining orders, put that out there. So very interesting how everything's aligning. Um, so as we know, the motion to vacate was denied, but it is being appealed in the Second Circuit. But now we're moving on to the VFF, which is the Very Fair Fund final accounting. And this is what Jason Siebert has been going back and forth with Allison Moon, who is the new SEC accountant, or what
No,
would it?
he's like a staff attorney.
Okay, staff attorney. So she's trying to basically finalize the final accounting, and Jason Siebert is now challenging that. Do you want to try and catch us up on that?
Yeah, specifically about 157.
Correct.
There, um, so again, I mean, it is important to note that the fraud on the court that's in the Second Circuit, so that's on the appeal. We're back in the district court now, so it is easy to get confused because you got one foot, in either court. But yes, this is so the Veri Fair Fund. The SEC claimed that the token holders were defrauded, and they took Reggie's money, they seized it, they sold off assets, and they created a pool of money that was supposed to be distributed to the defrauded. So what the SEC did in the Fair Fund is they blasted it out. They said, hey, if you were defrauded, if you bought Veritaseum tokens that we're calling securities, you were defrauded by Reggie Middleton, and you're eligible to file a claim and get reimbursed for your fraud losses. The SEC had a very tough time. It should be noted that they had a very tough time getting anybody to sign up for this. My numbers are rough, but I'm thinking that at the end of the day, they were able to get around 200-ish claimants. They only approved 103. Again, that's a roundabout. It's close to 103. And this is out of, if you track how many wallets hold Veritaseum, it's over 20,000. So the percent starting out is really low, right? They did not get a lot of interest, and they had to extend the deadline. They wanted to cut it off in September, and they had to push it back to January or something like that. They pushed it back a couple times, because the SEC is trying to protect us. They want the protected folks to show up and claim their reward, and nobody did.
And just to add to that, didn't they dangle a carrot there, suggesting that even if you filed or submitted a request for the Very Fair Fund, that you would be able to keep your Very tokens, but still get some kind of refund?
That's right. Everybody got to keep their Veri tokens. The way your wallet was verified, they sent you a test token and they told you to send back a portion, like, half or 0.25, whatever the number they said, send that back. And then that verified your wallet. But again, they only got 103 folks, and that may be 103 wallets. So it may even be less individuals. I'm not 100%. Well, we don't have the final accounting. That's what we're asking for.
Right. So
So
I have actually two questions there. So if they're they're not seizing the token or trading or capturing the token, they're letting the um, claimants keep the token. Is that not against their procedure? Like it seems like they want to take these off the market. Am I right?
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that this is fairly novel stuff because think about it. Most fair funds are involving shares of stock. And what are shares of stock? They're they're not crypto assets. We are starting to tokenize shares of stock, but you got to go back to 2019. The SEC did not want that to happen at all. Tokenization, securitization, no thanks, whatever. So yes, the Veri token holders got to keep their Veri. I don't know if that's in a normal fair fund, if you had to forfeit the shares, but in essence, the shares would be worthless because nobody can trade them, right? That they'll be marked or flagged, and then you can't trade them. Like the MMTL people can relate to that, I think, because they flagged the shares and they basically made them untradeable.
Right.
In blockchain, it doesn't work that way. I mean, there are tokens sitting out there. There may be no demand for them. That's how, a token dies. But if as long as somebody wants that, it's there, so this is brand new stuff. The SEC did allow Veri token holders to keep their tokens and also, get reimbursed from the Veri Fair Fund. But I think that's a novel case. I don't know the ins and the outs of that. I'm more interested in, or what we were interested in back in the time, what was the final accounting. They seized Reggie's assets and they had to sell them off. What did you sell them for, SEC? That's all part of the final accounting. And then we're not asking for names. I can tell you that I am in contact with several people who did participate in the Veri Fair Fund, probably about 10% of the overall. I know these folks, and they're telling me they're not defrauded by Reggie. Um,
And
I think
I should add, there's not one witness that came forward claiming they actually were defrauded, right? There's not one.
No, there was one overseas person who fell and got hurt and could not give an official deposition. The other one was Michael Middleton, who completely recanted his story, and he actually did an interview with Reggie a year or two ago, saying I was mistaken, right? And what the SEC was definitely twisting my words. I need to recant my story. I'm actually a witness for Reggie now, not the SEC.
Right.
And to that last guy, the only guy that they had that was a witness, he never showed up. So no, the SEC has no witnesses of fraud.
There is a few token holders that bought at ICO that actually tried to claim the VFF, Very Fair Fund, but they were actually denied their claim because the price that they bought their tokens at the ICO was actually less than the current value that you could sell your tokens at now. So they're basically
Mm.
saying, or their argument is that these token holders could actually sell their very tokens for a profit. Meanwhile, we have this no action letter that was Jeremy Hogan actually looked into or worked with us or the very DAO on trying to get a no action letter from the SEC. And Jorge Tenrero, who was in this interview and actually shouldn't have been in there, from my understanding, actually said that the very tokens were securities without actually writing it down and forbid or said that the very token holders could not sell the tokens. So we got ourselves a little bit of a catch-22 here where
Right.
they want people to submit a claim for the VFF, but at the same time, they're saying that the ICO purchasers can't claim because the value of the token is more than what they paid for.
That is exactly right. Yes, that happened. So, and I've seen the emails from one guy. I think it might have happened twice or three times, Riz, but I've actually been in contact with one person who did participate in the ICO. That's all. That's the only time he bought Veri tokens in 2017 at the ICO, and he tried to claim as a victim, of fraud for the Veri Fair Fund. Now, again, he says he's not defrauded, but free money's free money type of thing. The SEC came back in writing, or it's not the SEC, it was the fund administrator. And they said that at the time that they were doing the redemptions, that the price of Veri on the secondary market was higher than he paid initially during the ICO. So they said, well, you can just sell it and you're not at a loss. So no, you don't qualify for the Veri Fair Fund. I mean, again, how ridiculous is that on its face? You don't qualify. You're defrauded, but you don't qualify because you can turn around and sell these assets. Now, I believe I have to go back and timestamp this, but I believe that was a 2020 conversation. In 2021, that's whenever Jeremy Hogan did get involved. That's whenever the VeriDAO, the community raised a few funds, and Trey represented us. The no action letter was sent to the SEC. And then, I think it was about a month later, they did have a powwow. And it was usually no action letters are handled by corporate division of finance attorneys. But this was handled by, as you say, enforcement was there. There was an unnamed attorney and then two, I believe, from the corporate division of finance. So four attorneys, Jeremy Hogan. And in that, again, this is Jeremy Hogan saying this, that Jorge said, you tell your clients to watch out because they are unregistered securities. They should not be buying or selling them. So what you said is exactly right. You have a token holder who participated in the ICO, go sell it is what the fund administrator is saying. And then you have the SEC itself in the no action letter conference saying, no, be careful handling these things. We might come after you.
Crazy.
Well, you almost have to wonder if the ambiguity was intentional or if it just has to do with lack of communication and incompetence.
Or
Yeah.
all the above, Adam.
Yeah,
Right.
you guys seem to get a lot of pushback on your FOIAs, like your example with the Vader platform, where they're denying essentially that even happened. Uh, so yes,
Correct.
I definitely see what you're saying there.
Yeah, it's almost systemic. The ambiguity, at least that I've experienced, I'm sure you too, Michael, but it's almost systemic confusion. I mean, that's could be a tactic. It could be a tactic. I guess the other thing I wanted to just throw out there too is, was it a requirement to admit that you were defrauded in order to participate in the Veri Fair Fund?
Well,
No,
So
to
it's
that
a,
question, I'd like to add too that from my understanding, everybody that purchased a Veri token at the ICO or IPO or IDO, whatever you want to call it, every person that purchased a Veri token signed um, not only a purchase agreement, which stated that the Veri token itself had no value except for on the very platform trading it in for uh, products and services. So it's essentially a
ab-
license key,
yeah.
right? So
yep.
every token in circulation right now was purchased through a purchase agreement and then sold in the secondary market.
Yeah. I know we've mentioned this before, but I think it's just important to drive that home and remind everybody that that is the case.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so from there, now I guess I'm going to share a screen just to kind of catch us up where we are in the docket. We have the docket here starting at 83, and this is essentially where the distribution agent first progress report. So my understanding is they are supposed to submit quarterly reports, accounting reports. So not just a report, but actual accounting to kind of show their work and be transparent with all the funds. And they basically failed to do it. Now, here it says I have to buy all the files on Pacer, but we have here 11th progress report and a 12th progress report. And if I open these, we see that there is actually no accounting attached to any of this. Um,
And I can verify that there is no accounting. I mean, and the SEC admitted that in 157.
exactly.
We're working on getting more of these documents public, but this is a good example. And you can, I mean, they all look like that. There is no hard accounting in any of these updates.
Right. So just to be clear for everybody, this new document 157 in mid-December, uh, well, throughout a few months there, Jason Siebert was arguing with Allison Moon, who actually replaced Catherine Pappas to handle the final accounting of the VFF fund. Basically, just to recap, whenever Allison Moon came on board, Jason offered her extra time to catch up, review the documents, and basically submit a full accounting. And she denied the request for extra time. Now we fast forward to mid-December, and now she's begging the court for more time till January 23rd to recreate, as you said, recreate the final accounting quarterly reports. So not just one report, we're talking quarterly reports for what, 5, 6 years now?
Quarterly reports, they would have started in 21 through 24 is whenever they stopped. So at least 3 years. Yeah. And this is all ordered by the court. This is all in the consent judgment. So whenever Reggie consented, right, hands behind his back, he can't fight anymore, right? So we're going to consent to a judgment. In there, at least they were fair. They said, "Hey, we'll produce final accounting, detailed records of where this money's going to go," right? I mean, as you should. Um, and that's what we're talking about now because that did not happen. Those records, I mean, I hope that they were kept. That somebody's putting them together right now. Um, and we'll see what happens there. But that's what we're talking about because you finally have the SEC admitting there is no accounting.
Right.
Hmm.
And just to catch people up who may not have seen the whole story here, but what Michael just mentioned was basically two parts. So Reggie's motion to vacate his consent judgment, as he said, was because the SEC basically fabricated this story of dissipating assets through a personal account to issue an asset freeze. And this asset freeze basically forced Reggie into this consent judgment where he neither admitted or denied the allegations against him. So that's part one. Now we're on to part two, which is this VFF challenge, where we see some questionable, at the very least, we don't see any accounting or any transparency of the Very Fair Fund at all.
Yeah, and I mean, it it's still millions of dollars back then. But if you put a today's value on this kind of stuff, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. it does need to be properly accounted for in my mind. I mean,
Yes. Yeah, and going back to the 103 claimants that you mentioned, Jason Siebert also brought up an interesting point on how some of the math uh, isn't mathing, as some people would say. Uh, like we've got RCB Services, which is Richard Breeden, who is an ex-SEC chair. Um, and it looks like his firm may have, pocketed $9,600 an hour just to manage 103 claimants, which is astronomical in a comparison to other final accountings.
right. Again, I guess sticking with the timeline, the quarterly reports that were supposed to be done, they stopped happening in January of 2024, Riz. And that's really, again, that's what we were going on. There was no active litigation at this point. There's just SEC quarterly reports. And they said that the final accounting should be the next filing that we make. That's what the January document says. And that never came. And we waited and we waited. And if you can pull up the document, I'll show you what we're talking about. It should be, yeah. It should be 94. 94 is the last quarterly report status. Okay.
Hold on one sec. You're talking about on the court docket, 94 line item.
Correct.
Okay, so you were saying 94, line item 94?
Yes. Yeah, you actually have access to that. That's the last quarterly update. And in there, they're going to say anticipated next steps. And so, they say we're expecting to file a motion to terminate the Veri Fair Fund. We'll give you, an accounting of what's been paid. And none of this ever happened. Okay. We're just sitting there. Yeah. See, January 26th. None of this ever happened. If you go back to the docket, you'll see that the next entry isn't until November.
Right.
And all I would like to point out is that in October, we filed a FOIA request asking for these accounting documents.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, we had a second VFF FOIA request that was originally filed in February of 25.
Correct.
Right. And what's interesting about both of these requests is that they've been denied, appealed, and on remand at this point. I'm not sure when the first one went into remand, but I can tell you that the second one was 5 days before the government shutdown, so September 25th. It looks like they're keeping these on the shelf while they do whatever they're doing right now with the accounting. So there's definitely more to come on this, but we're keeping a watchful eye.
Now, when you say remand, what do you mean by remand? Just to clarify.
So when the request gets denied, we appeal it, and then that's when it goes into remand.
I understood. Okay.
If it's accepted.
Yep.
Sorry, Michael, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No worries. And so, just to piggyback on what Adam was saying, that we have had to. Adam and I kind of tag team this. The FOIA work is too much for one person. Especially a non-legal. Adam and I are not legal folks. We're just we're interested people. So anyway, I filed one relating to these documents in October, and then again, Adam piggybacked because I was not getting anywhere. He filed one in February after a lot of this had already been, rehashed in front of the court. But what we asked for, what I asked for, and what Adam asked for are very similar. And in the request, we asked for the final accounting because we've never seen it. We had not seen this document at that point. We also asked for communications between the SEC officials and RCB Services. To your point, that's who's administering the fund. And then we asked for communications between Holland and Knight and Miller Kaplan. Those are your the lawyers behind the Veri Fair Fund and the accountants behind the Veri Fair Fund. They're doing the work for the government. In essence, the SEC is contracting these folks to manage the Fair Fund on their behalf. And then obviously we asked for other communications. This was a very broad FOIA. again, this was filed back in October. And just to give you an example of how long this process takes. So I filed in October, then we get to argue in front of the judge in November. Adam files in February of this year. And then we finally get a response back that we are able to introduce to the judge in relation to the Veri Fair Fund. What did we get from the SEC? Well, we got a document that says there's 97 gigabytes of data. Your FOIA was very broad, and I acknowledge that. It was a broad FOIA. I asked for all communications, this and that. But the SEC ran it, and they came back with 97 gigabytes. And they said that's too much to give you. They usually say that, like, it's going to take years. It's just, you can't have that much data. But the other thing is, and what was interesting here was that they excluded it also based on the fact that these documents may be under an investigation. And the exact language, I have that if you want me to read that. It is interesting.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is exhibit A of filing 134. So this was the this was the third VeriDAO amicus filing. This right here was the third, because after we submitted the smoking flash drive FOIA, then the court's attention turned to the Veri Fair Fund, and we had FOIA work done there. Again, going all the way back to October 25 of 2024. That's whenever this started. And you can see what I asked for. And then you can also see that, it takes them till January 23rd to get back. And they say 96.9 gigabytes. And and then you can go back and forth and you can see the work that we had to do, right? Because they're saying, yes, there's something here, but it's too much. You can't have it.
Right.
So they narrow it. As you scroll down, you can see that there's correspondence back and forth through February. They get back to me in February. There's more follow-up in March and April, but they don't acknowledge that. Yeah, well, they do the April one. And that's where they informed me that the enforcement division held the records. And the last part is where you're going to see the under investigation. As a result of further review, the records that may be responsive to your request, we have determined at this time access is denied. This exemption protects documents which could reasonably interfere with enforcement activities. So I don't know what kind of games the SEC is playing, with that response. They have documents. There may be enforcement activities going on, so we can't give you any. It's not a good response.
It's not transparent, that's for sure.
Absolutely not.
No.
Okay, so moving on to document 157, which is what was submitted on December 19th. Let me just pull it up for you guys. So this is the SEC's reply on December 19th. And we see here that they're basically asking for more time till January 23rd, 2026 to recreate all of the quarterly reportings, basically admitting that they don't have any of them already done. And one of the things I wanted to mention was Jason Siebert actually called out how in the reports that they actually did provide that there were missing pages. As an example, and maybe I should pull that up. But yeah, and in one example, one of their exhibits had pages 6 and 7 missing. So I believe it was exhibit B ended at page 5, and exhibit C started on page 8. So pages 6 and 7 were missing as an example, and I think there was a few other pages missing as well. And
now they were able to get an affidavit for those missing pages from the person who put it together, and he just said he had an affidavit that said he didn't have access to those pages, or there were no missing pages, something to that effect. But
yeah, I believe this was Mr. Sanchez, and I believe he mentioned that they were done by a different company.
Yeah, they didn't have access to them in essence. So
yeah, so which also is not very transparent, considering this is supposed to be done quarterly to be transparent for the supposed defrauded victims of this. Um, so very, very interesting document here, essentially admitting that they don't have any of the quarterly reportings done, as was requested or stated in the final judgment that they were supposed to have quarterly reportings, and they basically didn't comply with the court order.
Yeah.
So not a good look for the SEC at all. And I'm very curious to hear their response because they're going to have to count for every penny. And if they don't, I mean, what happens if they don't?
I don't know. I don't know. It does. It leaves a terrible taste in your mouth. It's like Elon Musk says, throughout this whole process, I've lost respect for the SEC. I do not respect the SEC. I do not respect them, especially through the FOIA process. The word transparency keeps coming up. It is anything but transparent. These folks' job is to protect themselves. That's what I found. They do that through saying that there's too much information to give you. They say that through. I had the original FOIA request was split. If you remember that, they play different games to just not give you the information. And the whole thing is we're sitting here, holding up the original SEC complaint, still scratching our heads, saying, "You guys, none of this makes sense anymore." In hindsight,
Yeah.
it
Well,
doesn't.
one of the things that may be a little off topic, but you're right. It does make sense to me because looking back, you look at the original complaint, and they literally throw everything at the wall to see what'll stick. And Reggie actually replied with a 420-page reply to the temporary restraining order. 420 pages. And days later, like I'm talking a weekend, maybe 5 days later at most, Jorge Tenrero and Victor Soothmanot, they basically submitted their motion to in support of the asset freeze, basically saying in that motion that Reggie never challenged any of the claims against him. Meanwhile, he actually did. He actually submitted a 420-page report detailing every complaint they had against him. He rebutted everything, and they said he didn't rebut anything. Um, so there's a lot there that is very questionable to me. And the more you look at it, the more questions I get. So this is extremely curious for me, just being a layman and trying to understand all of this. It feels like they're hiding something.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important to note though too, they might have been able to pull off a lot of dishonest uh, you know, aspects of the case, but numbers are very difficult to lie with, right? I mean, numbers are either right or they're not. So it'll be interesting to see what gets produced and then whether or not it's actually accurate.
Right. Well, on that note, is there anything else that you felt we didn't cover or you'd like to add to the conversation?
Just as always, I want to say thank you for to the community that we're still here. The VeriDAO, if we can be of assistance, thank you again for the funds, for the donations, because we do have a little bit that we can continue on, as necessary. Um,
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that the community stepped up to support the VeriDAO's efforts and to support Reggie in his motion to vacate. Um, because, like I said, there's a lot of people here called the defrauded that are actually sacrificing a lot of their time and money and efforts to find out the truth. So I commend you guys for all your hard work in in this back and forth with the FOIA department because it's clearly not easy. They're definitely giving you guys the runaround. So I appreciate all your hard work and effort in here. I know you both have full-time jobs, so you're actually essentially taking on a second job with this because it is a great deal of work to get anything.
For sure. It's worth every bit of it though. And I mean, I would also just like to thank the community. We have a unique community, we have a smart community, and it's great to see that everybody here is still around following the story and contributing in any way that they can. I also want to just say, Riz, thank you for all your work. You are definitely the voice and the face of the community. And, I just wanted to also say for everybody who's watching, make sure that you follow, comment, bookmark anything that Riz is doing. And he's definitely getting some traction. The story seems to be gaining some momentum for sure. So I think all engagement, hands on deck, and help bring that story to the forefront.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank
And
you, Riz.
yeah, and again, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Adam. Again, I appreciate all your efforts and look forward to digging in to the response on January 23rd, and maybe I'll have you guys back and we can look at it together.
That sounds great.
Perfect. All right, gentlemen, you have yourselves a great day and thanks for joining me. We'll see you guys next time.